Welcome back to Turning the Tide. We are visiting with Ken Sumsion today. He is running for governor in the state of Utah, and Ken is a huge oh shoot, I can't even think of the word. Anyway, he's a huge supporter of 10th Amendment rights. He's a man who has been on the front lines of 10th Amendment rights for the states here in the United States of America, and also he has been fighting hard for the state of Utah to gain access to their public lands again so that we can become financially independent, basically. And if we were allowed to access our natural resources in Utah, not to mention the rest of the United States of America, we would be completely energy independent. We would be able to work our way out of this economic morass that we're in, and it would allow us to whittle the debt down to nothing that we have here in America. And all that stands between us and that instance, we are completely financially solvent again, is the federal government. Now, Ken, as he has said in the first half of the show, said that as long as the states will work together and exercise their 10th Amendment rights, in other words, take them back, because as he said, the colonies created the federal government. The federal government did not create the colonies. The colonies became states, and the states have the right, almost all of the authority, to do just about everything as long as it doesn't violate the U.S. Constitution. Now, Ken, let's talk about education. You have mentioned it a few times, but tell me how you feel about education, how critical it is, and if we're able to access our lands, what difference that will make for the children of Utah.
Let me start on the financial side of that question. If we gain access to our public lands, in our Enabling Act that we talked about earlier, our contract when we came into statehood, basically the terms of that agreement said that when the federal government disposed of those lands, we were to receive 5% of the sales proceeds to be sent to and contributed into our education fund. So if you look at the Carapets Plateau as one example, where there is, depending on how you estimate the numbers, there's anywhere from 1 to 10, maybe could even get to $20 trillion or more of natural resources. If you just take the 1 trillion number, 5% of that, simplifying the argument here very, very much, and I recognize that, but if you take 5% of that, you would have $50 billion coming into our education fund. We would no longer be the lowest per pupil funded education system in the country. So in not being able to access these public lands, one of the groups of people that are harmed by that is our school children. Because we do have more children per family, because that's important. That's our culture as families and family values in this state. And so when you get access to that, we totally change the paradigm of how we fund public education completely. Then, if I may loop back around on where are we at with education? We do have a well-educated workforce. I think that speaks for itself as a governor, as you convey to other corporations why they should come to Utah. I think we have to be very judicious in picking winners and losers, but we have great assets in the work ethic and the education of our people. Now, to continue to be a leader we have to improve our education. But how are we going to do that? And what I've come to realize after 3 terms as a state legislator is we try really hard to reform our education system to meet the demands of the 21st century from the top down. And we need to change that focus. It needs to be bottom up. It needs to be from the parents, from the classroom, from the teachers. And our education system has really evolved into a student on any given day could be in 5 different public institutions. We have public district schools, we have public charter schools, we have public ATCs, we have public online courses, we have public universities. And a student may be in any one of those on any given day. Our funding mechanisms and distributions of our education funds don't match that model. And that's the model that we've evolved to, and that is a model that parents are allowed to say and work with their students to say, well, geez, I want to go get a certificate from the ATC while I'm going to high school and get credit for that. We need to fix our funding models, and as we do that, basically what we're doing is we need to simplify it. We need to simplify it so that parents understand how much money is associated with their students' education each year, and then they can work within public institutions where their child will go to school. And in doing that, what we're generating is local control. And also what we're generating is that these 5 institutions can compete with each other. And as we've spoken about on other issues, what's made America great is when things get tough, Americans, the ingenuity rises up. They figure out how to do things better, smarter, less expensive. And that's what we need to leave with our classrooms and our parents, with our teachers, is let them find the solutions that bring us into the 21st century as far as education systems. Because really our education system kind of looks like it did 50 years ago.
And that's not good.
And the structure hasn't changed. We have got to change the structure, and it's got to be more nimble. It's got to be more nimble in its approach and how we educate our children, because the global economy is changing so rapidly. The technologies are what's important. Yes, that our children need to read, be able to do arithmetic and do those things. Yes, they do. But in high school, particularly, is a great opportunity to educate our kids to be competitive in a global market. And that requires some different skills, requires some computer skills. And America's led. America's been the leader in that technology, but we're starting to slip to other nations. And but it can't be mandated from the state. It's got to be from the parents, from businesses. And we have some great initiatives going in the state where businesses are getting involved. They need to help work hand in hand with our classrooms, with our teachers, with our parents, and figure out what the curriculum needs to be. And that needs to be from a local control area. And so I as governor, I would advocate that we seriously look at the structure that we have currently in place. And we've got to make it a 21st century structure, not what we currently have. And that'll take some changes. That'll take some leadership.
Yes.
But in doing that, we'll have a better education system that will meet the demands of educating our kids for a global economy.
Let me ask you this, Representative Sumsion. You mentioned earlier that if we only got 5% if our lands were being used, it would be about $50 billion. You said. From
as one example, the Caucus Plateau, if we assume it has $1 trillion of natural resources, which is the bottom end of that, at 5%, that would be $50 billion that should be flowing back into our education fund if the Caucus Plateau, if we had access to the coal reserves there. And currently we don't, because it got locked up by President Clinton under the Escalante Monument down there, and so we don't have access to those resources.
Well, yeah, and that's just one resource, one area in the state of Utah.
Yep.
If we look at it, if I asked Representative Daw, who is my own representative, a couple of years ago what our state budget was, and he says, if I remember right, and I'm sure it's gone up in the last couple of years, it was $12 billion. Is that still about right?
Yes.
Has it gone up or down?
It's up over $12 billion, but $12 billion is a very good number.
Okay, and so we're looking at $50 billion right there.
Mm-hmm.
Right in that one place. And
that's just for education. That doesn't include severance taxes and so forth that would flow into the general fund. Remember the 77 oil leases that Salazar yanked from the state of Utah?
Oh, I remember. Yes, I remember.
To give you some financial impact numbers from those 77 oil leases that went through a several-year process working with environmentalists, and they said, no, we're not going to issue leases here, but yes, this is okay. They were totally and completely involved in the process. At the end of the day, he yanked them. The financial impact was about $150 to $200 million that would have come to our education fund over 10 years, and our general fund lost upwards of possibly $800 million. So a $1 billion impact by 77 oil leases to the state of Utah over a period of 10 years.
Is there anything our governor and our AG could have done to counteract that? As governor, is there something if that situation were to arise again as governor, what would you do?
We should very aggressively pursue counter lawsuits and pursue those from every angle of violation of federal process, because the claim at the time by Ken Salazar was, oh well, this was a midnight deal of the Bush administration. That was a complete lie.
Yes, it was a lie.
and that's a very strong political term to use, but it was a complete lie. These leases have been going through a several-year process, working through the federal process, had environmentalists, had everybody involved, and they took some good lands off of the table. And they said, okay, we won't issue leases for these lands, but for these we will. And so we should have pursued every. I mean, we should have been filing lawsuits and saying, no, these leases are good, and they need to stand. The gentleman that helped complicate that process, I can't remember his sentence, but he was convicted for.
Christopher.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's who you're talking about. Yes, and I'm glad he was sentenced. He deserved it. All right, Ken, we're coming up towards the end of the interview. What are any last messages you would like to give to the people of Utah as to why they should support you in your run for governor? And by the way, his website is electKenSumsion.com, so that's where you can go learn more about Ken. Go ahead, Ken.
This is what I'll do as the next governor of the state of Utah. Every time I submit a budget to the legislature, it will be a smaller state budget. It will be a smaller state government. And second, I will reduce in every budget that I submit to the state legislature, the state of Utah taking less federal funds. Every dollar we take from the federal government, we have lost $1 of freedom to the state of Utah. We have got to turn that coin over and start reducing the federal funds that we're taking, and I will do that. I will not have my hand out to Washington, D.C. We have the resources in our state that we can be self-sufficient, and we can do that on our own, and it starts with our budget. And those are two things that you will see from Governor Sumsion if elected by the people for the next 4 years. Every budget will be smaller state government and less federal money. Well, I have to tell you, I need to tell all my listeners that I personally endorse Ken Sumsion in his run for governor. I know him. I know him to have been an incredible legislator, and I know him to be a very good man. And there's no question or doubt in my mind that he is the choice for the next governor for the state of Utah. So, Ken, thank you for joining us today. If there's anything else we can do here on Turning the Tide to help you in your campaign, please let us know. Well, thank you, Candace. I appreciate your time and letting me speak to your listeners. Thank you so much. Absolutely. Have a good day. All right. Thank you, Candace. Bye-bye.